of course, on the 4-year course, you start with the prelim. And there's a lot of crossover between prelim and Part 1A. As I said, these are about getting a real grounding in the ancient languages that's going to sort of open up your opportunities, allow you to engage in the subsequent years, on your own pace and on your own initiative with the ancient texts. So that's really what prelim and Part 1A are about. It's about getting the languages sorted, but there's still plenty of opportunity at prelim and 1A to start to explore the different sides of classics that you might want to specialize in later. So you'll have taster sessions in non-literary subjects. You will be able to choose a couple of non-literary topics, so something in ancient history, something in archaeology or philosophy or philology to do in addition to the languages in those years. And that's also assessed with a mix of exams and some coursework elements as well. So you get a bit of experience in the different ways that you might write about classics as well. But with those first years out of the way, the course then starts to open up quite dramatically to give you a lot of options to focus on the bit of the ancient world that you're most interested in. So Part 1B, there are still some language requirements, but ultimately now we've actually just reformed Part 1B this year to give students allow them to start focusing earlier on the types of stuff they really want to do. And that only continues more in Part 2, where basically putting together your final exam slate is entirely up to you. So at Part 2, your course is composed of 4 different options. We'll look at some options in a second. You can swap one of those options out for a thesis, or dissertation, which students who do that find that really, really rewarding, and a lot of time that's the kind of preliminary for going on to do classics at a postgrad level. Or you can even take a subject from outside classics in Part 2. If you're really interested in more modern philosophy or modern history, for example, you can do that. So the point of the first few years is really to get you to the stage at which you can make your own decisions and focus on what you want to focus on. And that does mean that if you're the kind of person who, you understand the value of getting really competent in Greek and Latin in order to engage in the text in the original, but you don't necessarily want that to be the sort of be-all and end-all of your final grade, you can focus on other things for Part 2. You can focus on history options. On the other hand, if languages is really what gets you going and translating Greek and Latin is all you want to do, there are options for you as well. And this is just a very quick run through some of the Part 2 final year options we currently have. And what you'll see here is a real mix of the kind of the traditional stuff, the stuff that you would think now, yeah, that seems like classics to me, but also hopefully lots of stuff that you haven't really thought about before, like Greek poetry in the Roman world, late antiquity, Aegean prehistory, and that should say beyond classical art, not behind classical art. So lots and lots of different options for what you might want to do, including some really exciting initiatives of papers offered between different faculties. So for example, one recent one, X3, which is shared between us and Divinity and is all about the different ways that we can approach the ancient world and late antique religious history, both from the perspective of divinity or theology and classics at the same time. So lots of options. And I should also make you aware of one other classics type degree that you can do, which is classics with a modern language. That is administered, so if you did that, your home would be in the medieval and modern languages faculty. So if you want a bit more information on that, do go to their website. They'd be the ones administering that, and you'd be applying for that course. But that gives you the opportunity to get the same teaching in the ancient languages that we do here in the faculty, while also working in a modern language as well. And that degree course, that has the possibility of a year abroad, which we don't offer here in the classics faculty, but they do in MML. That's all from me on the Cambridge structure, so over to Georgy.
All right. Well, here you have an Oxford building, which in fact you won't much use. Radcliffe Camera, it mostly has modern history books. Many things are very, very similar between the two courses. There are a few major differences. One is the variety of different courses you can apply for, and the other is a slight variation in course lengths. So at Oxford, there are two main single school courses run within the classics faculty in which you can study the ancient world. One is classics, or to call it by its old formal name, Literae Humaniores, and that is the more language and text-based course, although it is quite multidisciplinary, as you'll see in a moment. The other is classical archaeology and ancient history, and that puts a stronger focus on material and visual culture and studying it in conjunction with ancient history. There are quite a few similarities between them, but it would be fair to say that there is a stronger focus on these different sides of the study of the ancient world. And we also, as Cambridge does with classics and modern languages, offer joint schools with other faculties, joint courses, slightly different and, I suppose, larger variety. We do also do classics and modern languages, which works, in fact, in many ways very similarly to how the Cambridge course of that name goes. But we also do classics with Asian and Middle Eastern studies, classics and English with the English faculty, and ancient and modern history with history faculty. And I'll say a few more words about it in a moment. So, Literae Humaniores, classics, all of Oxford courses, including this one, just as in Cambridge, you can apply for with or without ancient languages, and we have a long and very proud story of teaching ancient languages from scratch. Classics is a course where you have to learn them, and which is centered on study of ancient sources in their original, in considerable detail. That is at the core of the course, and at the end of the day, in your finals, a certain proportion of your papers has to be what is in Oxford parlance called text-based, i.e. you have to study texts for it in their original and will be tested on translation and commentary. We just about from, in fact, your round of applications to reform the first part of the course somewhat. We used to call the stream which started with Latin and or Greek at A level, course 1, and the stream that started with no ancient languages at A level or equivalent, course 2. There is now a single classics course with a slightly more flexible structure of language streams, but it's not a very profound change to what happened before. The key distinction from Cambridge, which will remain, is that in either case it is a 4-year course, but obviously if you had no ancient languages, you will start from learning 1, and if you had one ancient language, you will immediately pick up the other. And the difference from Cambridge is that if you had no ancient languages, you can start either from Latin or from Greek. That is your choice. It would perhaps be fair to say that slightly more people start from Latin, but it's entirely possible, and we had some absolutely brilliant students to start from Greek. And it is not compulsory in that case, although again, plenty of people do that, to learn both. You can go through Oxford Classics course if you had no ancient languages at school with learning just one language. But already in the first half of the course, in the so-called mods, you do plenty of other things on top of learning languages. You will do papers in Greek and Latin literature. You will do a special subject in philosophy, and philosophy is very much an integral part of Oxford Classics course, and you can study modern philosophy as part of it, and you can pick a special subject in ancient history, archaeology, or philology, linguistics. And like at Cambridge, this sets you up, this gives you the basic background, and then you move into the second half of the course, so-called grades. There are about 80 different subjects to choose from. Like in Cambridge Part 2, that's essentially your choice. There are some restrictions on permissible combinations and so on, but you do 8 papers of your choice, and the variety and the number of possible combinations is enormous. And like at Cambridge, you can do a dissertation as part of that range and do really your own thing. Joint schools, again, you can do with ancient language from scratch, or with ancient language from A-level. Classics and English, in that sense, works very similarly to Cambridge Classics course, presumably was influenced by it, because you do this prelim year of language work quite similar to how Cambridge does it before embarking on a single stream of classics and English. Classics and modern languages and classics and Asian Middle Eastern studies, you can either start from classics mods, in which case you'll do a year and a half of classics before adding another language, or you can start with prelims in a modern language or in Asian language, Middle Eastern language, and in that case you start from there and then add classics. In modern languages, in fact, you already do a bit of ancient language in prelims in that case. It would be fair to say that classics and modern languages and classics and English in particular are rather more literary degrees than classics main school is. You can't do modern philosophy. There are some restrictions on how much ancient history or archaeology you can do, and of course, because there are compulsory literary papers on classic science, and part of your complement of finals papers is taken by modern language papers, English papers, the scope for doing ancient history, philosophy, and archaeology is anyhow restricted. So if your interest in classics is mostly on historical, archaeological, or philosophical side, you probably should think of literary humaniores or KMH, I'll talk about in a moment. Classics and Asian and Middle Eastern studies is more mixed in that sense, not least because papers on Asian and Middle Eastern side are also not all of them linguistic. You can take historical and archaeological papers there. And one final bit on it is for Asian and Middle Eastern studies is that there is a limited list of languages and cultures that our Asian and Middle Eastern studies colleagues think go well with classics. It's not every single Asian language you can pick up that way. We're often asked whether you can do Chinese or Japanese with classics. At the moment, unfortunately not. And now we have two non-linguistic degrees, as it were, classical archaeology and ancient history, which is one of our two main offerings within the Faculty of Classics itself, and ancient and modern history. Both of them are 3-year courses. There is a possibility in both of them to learn ancient languages, or indeed to use ancient languages you already know from school, but it's not compulsory. The key things that classical archaeology and ancient history offers, quite uniquely, we think, among courses of this kind in the UK, is integrated classes where historians and archaeologists teach together and bring these two different perspectives together within the same teaching setting. These, we think, works very well, but there are also separate papers on both history and archaeology, and it also offers opportunities for fieldwork. In fact, it's compulsory fieldwork at the end of the first year, and for museum internships, and as a kind of final dissertation, students have to do a so-called museum or site report, either on a group of objects in a museum or on a small archaeological site. And there is this in-depth engagement with material culture, but within the broader historical context. And ancient and modern history offers an even broader historical scope. It's good for people interested in comparative global history. You can do pretty much anything within it and do quite a lot of historical methodology in paper disciplines of history, but people who want to think about how, I don't know, Roman Empire and steppe empires of medieval Eurasia compare, or how does European colonialism compare with Greek and Roman colonialism, or how does modern democracy compare with ancient democracy. That's the subject for them. And with this, I pass it back on to Ben.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So that's what the course structures look like, but what's the actual process of engaging with this material, learning the stuff? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Well, one of the great things about both Oxford and Cambridge is the sheer kind of range of different contexts, different ways in which you get to practice learning and experience this material. Obviously you will have lectures, which are the kind of core way in which material is going to be delivered sort of directly to you. That's the same as anywhere, basically, and you'll have some experience. You'll be able to see what that's like a little bit later today with the taster lectures. Then there are smaller group learning styles as well, so particularly for those intensive language classes, or at least here that you'd be doing in first and second years, those are in what we might think of as more a kind of a seminar size kind of group. Of course, there's going to be lots and lots of independent learning, though. That's the same with any humanities degree. This is about starting to explore the material on your own a little bit more. So there will be lots of time spent in the library thinking about these things on your own and writing your essays and using the material, some of the material that you've been given in those other forums to generate your own thoughts on them. So this is an exercise that's very much about getting you to explore on your own time, on your own terms, your own interests. But then what that independent learning really builds into, which is, of course, the unique aspect of these courses at Oxford and Cambridge specifically, are the very small group learning formats, which which are either one-on-one or one-on-two, or perhaps one-on-three in certain exceptional cases, but small groups. They're called supervisions here and tutorials at Oxford. And that's really where, you will have a full hour to really get into depth with the material with a supervisor who is going to be an expert in that particular area. So this is a really unique offering, part of the unique offering of Oxford and Cambridge. And normally, the kind of typical way that works is you'll be set an essay question and given some reading in advance by the supervisor. You'll then, in that sort of independent learning style of working, you'll go and write your essay in the library, you'll submit it to the supervisor, and then you will get essentially an hour-long discussion in which you'll both be thinking a little bit about the essay specifically, so helping you to improve your writing skills, your ability to be persuasive, and sort of defend your own point of view, but also then thinking more broadly about the types of questions that the material generates. So that's a very, very kind of rewarding way and a dialogue way of engaging with the material, which is, as I say, is quite unique. And then finally, we do have some options for field work and practical training, both here and I'm sure at Oxford as well. And there are, for instance, archaeological digs, which are run by some members of the faculty, and there are regular opportunities for students to go and do a summer, a few weeks excavating in the summer there, if they want to get their hands dirty and see what that looks like. And then lots of the students that do that then, of course, as you expect, go on to specialise in more archaeological options subsequently. So all of those options are there. And this kind of diversity is also reflected now increasingly in the Cambridge course reforms that we've been doing in the assessment formats as well. So traditionally here, at least, everything was just down to the exams. There is much more now. If you wish it, there are more options for coursework elements. So in the same way that there's a diversity of different ways for you to learn, there's also increasingly diversity in ways that you can be assessed as well. So now to talk a little bit about the process of applying, and there may be some repetition here between what we say, but I'll start talking specifically about Cambridge first. So, in the first instance, the application looks the same as, well, anything else on UCAS. Obviously, it just has to be by the Oxbridge UCAS deadline of October 15th. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you will then get the opportunity to submit some additional material. So for Cambridge, this is in the form of an additional personal statement, essentially, an extra box that you can write in a little bit more, really about why it's the Cambridge Classics course that's for you. So that's the thing to really use that additional, that bit of additional information for, because we know it's very difficult producing a single personal statement for lots of different universities and lots of different, you might even be applying for different courses at different universities, slightly different courses. So we understand that's very difficult, so we give you a little bit, another opportunity to just tailor what you're saying a little bit more specifically to Cambridge. And they'll also be, you'll also be submitting some written work at that point. And the written work, it doesn't need to be from classics. Obviously, as we've said, you might not be applying with Greek or Latin But ideally it wants to be some kind of humanities essay-based material that you know, the interviewers can sort of get their teeth into and understand where you're coming from. Or, you know, an EPQ, if you've written that, some extracts from that would be great. You apply to the college, so that's something to think about as well. Although this used to be different, you used to be interviewed by multiple colleges, now in this kind of post-COVID world, you will normally be interviewed just by your, the college to which you applied. What is that interview? You know, what are we looking for in the interviews? I think the word that comes up most often when you're sort of talking about making a decision is often supervisable. So if we think back to that you know, the unique way that you learn here in those kind of one-on-one or two-on-one sessions where you're having more of a kind of a discussion with the supervisor, you know, think of the interview as kind of a test case for that. We're looking for somebody who is going to be kind of intellectually agile, is able to say interesting things, and kind of respond to prompts in an intelligent way. But it's not necessarily about having all the information at your fingertips, right? And it's not necessarily about being super slick or being coached really well. At least we'd like to think that we can see through that. Probably you'll be asked some questions about the personal statement, so well, do make sure you know what you talk about in the personal statement. And you might be shown some text that you probably won't have seen before and asked to think about the context. What does this kind of say about the world that generated it? Or that will be in translation. Or, you know, if you have an archaeologist interviewing you, they might show you a picture of an item or a piece of artwork or something like that. That's the interview. And then there is also language assessments as well. So currently, the way that this looks is that there will be one of your interviews with the college. If you're applying to the 3-year course, if you already have Latin, will be kind of given over to a language assessment. If you're applying to the 4-year course, there will be a language aptitude test, which doesn't assume any knowledge about the ancient languages previously, but just to see how you might get on learning them when you start. And as it says there, a typical offer is, for A-level at least, is going to be A-star AA. Just to forestall one common question, the A-star doesn't necessarily need to be in Latin, so that's just one thing to put out there. But now back to Georgy to talk about Oxford.
Right. Plenty of things similar at Oxford. Some things are different. The key difference in terms of what we require is that we don't ask for A-star at A-levels or equivalent in IB or Scottish Highers, whatever it might be that you are taking. We ask for 3 A's. I won't go into philosophical discussions about whether we can trust A-stars in humanities, but clearly the 2 universities decided slightly differently. I will not, for the time being, although I'm happy to, well, not very happy, but I will answer this in questions, stop for a long time on admissions tests for the simple reason that Oxford, as you know, had some considerable difficulties with its admissions test provider last year, which Oxford now parted ways with that test provider that let university down, and university will make an announcement about what's happening with the tests in a few weeks' time, but I'm not in a position to forestall it. Oxford certainly is looking to have tests in the long run. What exactly the test provision will look like this year and in what ways it will change is as yet in the process of decision. One change that once the tests are fully up and running is going to happen is that we are hopefully from this year, probably from next year, introducing a test in cars, so all subjects will eventually have tests. Yet again, UCAS deadline, same as Cambridge, submission of written work. We don't ask for additional UCAS statement. Unlike Cambridge, that's another difference. And then there are interviews these days online in December. Normally, these will be absolutely guaranteed 2 interviews in your college of first choice, whether you've chosen one or been assigned one if you made a college blind application. For people who are applying for literary humaniores and haven't done an ancient language, there is an additional language aptitude interview which is run by the faculty. And then a fair proportion of applicants in Oxford do get interviews in one or more further colleges. This is a kind of safety net system. If you are getting an interview, shouldn't get you either elated or worried. A vast proportion of candidates do. There are fairly few candidates on whom the decision is taken immediately. It's after all of these rounds of interviews that decisions on admissions are in fact taken, but with some candidates, interviewers feel that they've given already as much of an account of themselves as is needed for assessment, with some further look might be helpful. It doesn't mean that you are doing badly, it doesn't mean that you are doing terrifically well. Again, what Dr. Kolbeck been saying about interviews at Cambridge very much applies at Oxford. It is a kind of segment of a tutorial. It differs, of course, from a normal tutorial in that you don't know in advance what's going to be happening there. But I always felt the key to a successful interview is to focus on a text, image, problem, whatever it might be, that the interviewers are offering you. Concentrate on that. They're chosen in a way which wouldn't particularly connect to anything you'd be likely to have directly studied at school. One of the ways to mess up either, I think, Oxford or Cambridge interview is to start frantically thinking, okay, what in A-level syllabus does this refer? What am I supposed to recall? Nothing. You are supposed to focus on what's given to you and engage in discussion. And do be prepared that some questions will be somewhat provocative. You're not supposed to always agree with your interviewers. But equally, one common myth about Oxbridge interviews is that interviewers are trying to trick you. That's absolutely what never happens. What is the aim of the interviews is to draw you out and to make you show yourself at your intellectual best. They don't want to ask you a stupid question about a banana which Daily Mail rolls out every year and make you to trip on that banana skin. That's absolutely not the aim. And the final thing about personal statement and interviews, some of the interviews, I'm sure at Cambridge too, would draw back on your personal statement. So what you put in your personal statement, make it something which you are actually interested in, what actually makes you tick as far as the subject is concerned. Don't try to second guess of what the interviewers would like to hear. There are a myriad different ways to study classics, and there is nothing worse than to write some book you think your interviewer would love to hear that you've read, then find it incredibly dull, and that happens to some poor soul every year. Come in and they say, well, you say Syme's Roman Revolution is your favorite book. Could we talk about that? And then you have to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I've read it in 3 pages and then found it unbearable. And that's never a kind of a nice moment for you. So do try to write, even if you think that's not the favorite book of your tutors, you've got no idea what is their favorite book. From applications, and I'm sure we'll have more questions about applications in question time, 2 final things we are going to talk about is benefits of the course. What do you take out of it? The skills that you learn, and of course universities these days are all about transferable skills. Of course you learn a lot about ancient world, and in the most direct way you are prepared for graduate study on ancient world or other ancient world related activities. But there are other things you learn. Linguistic aptitude in Greek and Latin, because of the in-depth study of morphology, syntax, the structure of the languages, has been found, there are good studies on that, to help linguistic aptitude more generally. These are good languages to start with, and also, of course, within European context, so many European languages, even not strictly speaking Romance languages, have been profoundly influenced by both Greek and Latin, but especially Latin. English has been. So it does help learning them. Indeed, there are elements of that in Arabic. It also, what Dr. Kolbeck has been saying about independent study, it's independent, very intensive study. You learn to work to deadline, you learn to absorb a lot of information within a single week, presented in a short, readable summary. These are skills which are useful in all walks of life, whether you go into business, civil service, journalism, law. This is precisely the kind of thing your line manager would want from you, and ability to write, argue, and criticize clearly, which is highlighted here, is absolutely crucial, but also ability to draw information from this incomplete jigsaw, which we always get in ancient sources, is extremely helpful in all sorts of analytical activities when you are trying to, at speed, analyze modern information. As equally is the kind of cultural sensitivity and attention to nuances of somebody's language and expression that classical study is all about. And unsurprisingly, there is an enormous range of careers in which these skills have been found useful. I won't obviously comment on every single one of them, but I don't know why social work is there twice, but I certainly have students who became social workers. I think every single one of them has some examples. I would know, I taught at Oxford now 20 years, from my personal experience. There are some that aren't here. I have pupils who gone on to be homicide detectives with the mat. to do jobs for Secret Service, GCHQ, whatever. I think Secret Service probably not a good one for the slide. But as you can see, beyond jobs which are more obviously directly connected to subject matter, academia, librarianship, archaeology, and what's meant by archaeology here is not just academic archaeology, but the kind of rescue excavations when they are doing the new motorway kind of thing. Quite a few jobs there, but also journalism, performing arts, business, law, and we know well that business law and civil service look with great favor on Oxford and Cambridge classics graduates. And with this is a non-updated slide with the names of the people to contact. I'll move it on because it's out of date for Oxford. I apologize for that. Plenty of ways to follow both faculties on social media, and on that note, we have some time for questions.
Yes.
We can probably go a bit beyond 12, can't we?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few minutes for questions, but just to say there's going to be plenty of opportunity to ask questions for the rest of the day. We're going to have the subject stands right after this, and there'll be the Q&A session with the students later. So you know, no rush to get everything out now. But if we have anything that people would like to ask us specifically, we have.
And we have a microphone, but do we have a student runner to get the microphone around? Well, we can
do it ourselves.
We can do it ourselves. Questions? Is there a question over there? If you press this button, everyone will hear you. It should flash green.
That's not a good start.
Yes? When it flashes green, we can hear you.
Does that work now?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was wondering about, in terms of fieldwork, the sites which you can pick, are they new sites which have been discovered, or would it be like currently like digging sites like Pompeii or stuff like that?
Not Pompeii usually. I don't know about Cambridge. Are not necessarily new sites in the sense that excavations on them just started. With Oxford, and I'm sure then you can supplement it for Cambridge. There is, for example, a dig at Halysa in Sicily that's been going on for about a decade. There is a dig at Demetrius in Sicily, which also been going on for about a decade. They are known sites, but they are not excavations that have been going on for centuries. A dig at Faleri Novi at Italy, at Canuntum, at Austria. We've been well connected with the dig at Bödeswald near Hadrian's Wall, but that's now over. There are some digs in the area of Pompeii. Oxford traditionally sent quite a few students to something called Apolline Project, which is also in the Bay of Naples, sort of 20 kilometers from Pompeii maybe, but not in Pompeii itself. I'm afraid Italian Archaeological Service guards it very carefully, and some of the digs in places like Pompeii and Rome itself, because of accommodation, are exceptionally expensive to participate in. There is a good teaching dig at Ostia, but which in principle people with independent means can go on, but just accommodation in Rome itself is beyond what a normal British university can finance.
Yeah. I mean, not much to add on that. It's similar here. I mean, it's digs that the digs that the faculty itself can organise, trips to are going to be ongoing sites that someone at the faculty has an ongoing relationship with. So, but yeah, they're not going to kind of set you out on a field and say, find something new in here. It's going to be something, but it will be a real a site where research is ongoing and there are new things being uncovered for sure. Yeah. We've got one in the middle here. Okay. Thanks.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah. Would you say in general terms that the classics course at Cambridge has more flexibility to kind of pick modules of your liking or kind of dabble in different disciplines, and that perhaps like the Oxford course is a bit more prescriptive, or is that not the case?
No.
Thank you.
I mean, Cambridge has, correct me, Ben, have complete freedom in the third year.
Yep.
Oxford doesn't have complete freedom for finals, but Oxford finals accumulate everything done from the middle of second year to the fourth year, and so that's eight papers, and you can definitely choose 4 papers there completely freely. There are some restrictions, but they are more or less equivalent to some restrictions Cambridge has in their second year. So it's just a slightly different structure of finals rather than Oxford more restrictive, Cambridge less restrictive.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's just a different way of achieving the flexibility. So obviously, I mean, at Oxford you do have the different degree options, whereas everyone's on the same stream here. And as we just heard, yeah, I mean, the philosophy behind the Cambridge flexibility is about getting you to part 2 where you have complete freedom. And that's also, part 2, the exams that you take at the end of part 2, they're going to be the ones that determine your degree classification. So again, that's about giving you as much control as possible, really, by that point. But yeah, ultimately, it's a slightly different structure of achieving the same thing, I'd say.
And what I'd say is look at what specific subjects Oxford and Cambridge offer, because the offerings from which you can choose do slightly differ. There are some subjects Cambridge offers we don't offer, and vice versa, depending on specialisms in the faculty and things like that. So if there is something either at Cambridge or at Oxford which you are particularly interested in, that might be an argument in choosing. But whatever you are particularly interested in of the final subjects, it is a university you'd be able to pick, basically. Well, let's start with the person in front and then the one just behind.
Hiya. For classics with Asian and Middle Eastern studies, is any background in any of those Asian or Middle Eastern languages needed?
No. I mean, these are not subjects, obviously, you can study at school level, certainly in this country, and I never heard of a country where you could do Akkadian at A-level equivalent, so we definitely don't require any of that.
Hi, if you are doing both Latin and Greek at A-level, will there ever be a time where you have to take a Greek language test as well as a language test to get in, or will it always just be Latin?
At Oxford, yes, provided, again, with the caveat that we don't wholly know the test provision for this year yet. If it will be going on as normal, there will be a Greek component to your test. What I would say about the tests and the samples of all tests on the website that are there is that regardless of whether there will be language tests in October, November in a traditional way, this year, faculty will run some kind of language assessment for people who've done it to A-level. Last year, because of the problems with the tests, we ran an additional language interview for everyone. And this is the kind of material that allows you to prepare for language assessment. This is the level faculty might be expecting. So even while we are waiting for the university to give us a green light, do look at them. They will be helpful.
And for Cambridge, well, if Franco can correct me if I make a mistake here, but the language elements of the 3-year, again, it's slightly in flux. It may not be exactly the same this year, but normally, and it may depend on the college, but normally the language assessment is going to be focused on the Latin, basically. And the difference, if you have Greek as well, coming in, is that you won't be on what we call the intensive Greek stream in Part 1A. And you'll have slightly more of the set texts to prepare for the exam, whereas those on the intensive Greek stream will have slightly less and the rest in translation. But ultimately, Part 1A will look very similar. You'll just have a slightly less intense year.
I know you said that if at Cambridge you're doing modern languages as well as classics, then you'd be centred at the medieval and modern languages faculty. Is it the same at Oxford?
Yes, this is a course which is owned in administrative terms by medieval and modern languages faculty at Oxford as well, which of course doesn't mean that they run the classics courses on it. That still happens within the Faculty of Classics, as I assume does at Cambridge. You still go to lectures in the Faculty of Classics, and classics tutors give you tutorials and so on.
Yeah.